You sure you won't have a sandwich?
Pardon?
Boogeyman band coming round the bend. Is Boogeyman band? Is Boogeyman band?
Greetings, my fellow Fright Fiends, and thanks so much for dropping by the Horror Zone channel. I hope everyone's doing well. Today's video is going to be part 3 in my Psycho 2 40th Anniversary Tribute series. I want to thank everyone for supporting the first 2 videos in this series, one focusing on Jerry Goldsmith's iconic score, and the other as a love letter to the late great Anthony Perkins, who played the Norman Bates character in Psycho 1 through Psycho 4. So today's video is going to be focusing on the film itself. Not only am I going to be talking about specific scenes from the film that impacted me, I'm also going to be giving an overview of the film and its production. And the final thing I'm going to be talking about is this amazing bound screenplay that I bought off of Tom Holland's website at Christmas time. This is an amazing screenplay. I just finished reading it the other day. I had wanted to wait and read it the week that I did this video. And I had a blast reading it. And what I want to talk about with regards to this is some of the changes that were made from the screenplay to what actually ended up in the film. And it's really interesting, and I just, having known the film back to front, I mean, I can pretty much quote it by heart, to read this and see what the original intentions were, talk about some of the character changes, some of the dialogue scenes that were actually removed from the final film. It's really was a great read. I absolutely recommend it 100%. I know that it is currently out of stock on Tom Holland's Terror Time website, but from my understanding, they are going to be restocking it. Definitely recommend picking it up, and I will talk about it later in the video. There will be major spoilers in this video, so if you haven't seen the film and you don't want anything spoiled for you, please I would just skip this one until after you watch the film. And like I said in my last 2 videos, Psycho 2 is probably the most important film in my life next to Salem's Lot. Both of those films changed my life, and I'm just happy that I get to talk about this amazing film, and I'm also really happy that I'm getting to sort of introduce it to people that might have just looked at it as an inferior film to Alfred Hitchcock's original. But yeah, first what I would like to do is go into some background on the film. Psycho 2 was released on June 3rd, 1983, and was directed by Richard Franklin and written by Tom Holland. The movie starred Anthony Perkins, Vera Miles, Robert Loggia, and Meg Tilly. It is the first sequel to Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 film Psycho and the second film in the Psycho franchise. Set 22 years after the first film, it follows Norman Bates after he is released from the mental institution and returns to the house in Bates Motel to continue a normal life. However, his troubled past continues to haunt him as someone begins to murder the people around him. In 1982, author Robert Bloch published a novel, Psycho 2, which satirized Hollywood slasher films. Concerned by this, Universal decided to make their own version that differed from Bloch's work. Australian director Richard Franklin, who was one of Hitchcock's students and even visited him on the set of Topaz, was hired to direct Psycho 2 on the basis of his earlier Hitchcock-inspired thrillers Patrick and Road Games. Universal hired writer Tom Holland to write the screenplay. Hilton A. Green, assistant director of the original Psycho, was contacted and asked if he wanted to produce the film. Green, fearing that Hitchcock may not have approved of the sequels to his film, called Hitchcock's daughter Patricia Hitchcock and asked what she thought of the film. Patricia Hitchcock gave her blessing to the film, saying her father would have loved it. Originally, the film was intended as a made-for-cable production. Anthony Perkins originally turned down the offer to reprise the role of Norman Bates, but when he read the script, he agreed to do the film. Perkins said, "When I received Tom Holland's script, I liked it very much. It was really Norman's story." Before landing Perkins, the studio was exploring recasting the part, and Christopher Walken was among those considered. Vera Miles also returned as Lila Loomis, but John Gavin was unable to reprise his role as Samuel Loomis after being appointed U.S. ambassadors to Mexico by President Ronald Reagan. Originally, Jamie Lee Curtis was sought to portray Lila's daughter, Mary, before Meg Tilly was cast. Principal photography of Psycho 2 took place at Universal Studios in Universal City, California on Soundstage 24 from June 30th to August 13th, 1982. The Bates house set was still standing from 1960, but the motel had to be reconstructed. Similarly to the original film, it was mostly shot on the Universal backlot and in a number of sound stages. Several props and set pieces from the original film were found by set designers John W. Corso and Julie Fletcher, including 2 Tiffany lamps, the stuffed owl and raven, the brass hands seen in Mrs. Bates' bedroom, the bedroom fireplace, the Victorian bed and armoire, and the 40-foot-long threadbare runner for the staircase. The exterior of the house featured in the original film was relocated to a different section of Universal Studios lot for the production. The town of Fairvale, seen when Lila Loomis is tailed by Dr. Raymond, is actually Courthouse Square, which is probably best known for its appearance in Back to the Future, located on the Universal Studios backlot. Both Franklin and Holland wanted the film to be a tribute to Alfred Hitchcock and the original film. To accomplish this, they added various in-jokes, such as the scene where Mary and Norman first go into Norman's mother's room. Before they turn the lights on, Alfred Hitchcock's silhouette is visible on the wall to the far right. The final pages of the shooting script were not distributed to cast and crew until the final day of filming. The last shot of the film with Norman standing in front of the house was used as a Christmas card for various crew members. When Universal presented concept art for the one-sheet film poster, Director Franklin was not pleased with it. It was editor Andrew London who came up with the idea of using the Christmas card photo as the film poster. Going into the film and some of the scenes that, even as a young kid, I remember just really captivating me. The one that always sticks out to me is when Norman and Toomey have the confrontation in the diner. And the thing I love about this scene is that just the way that it's staged, the way that it's written, and the way that Richard Franklin directs it, where you have the tension that's building. So you have Toomey that's kind of taunting Norman because of their altercation at the motel earlier, and then he's sort of harassing Mary, and Norman's chopping lettuce, and you see that there's a note on the wheel with all of the orders, and it's from Mother, and just building, to Toomey taunting Mary, and then Norman chopping the lettuce and helping Statler with the orders, just knowing that eventually he's going to get to that note. And then just what erupts after that. Again, it's a really great tension building scene, and just what comes after that when Norman finally does see the note and just goes off on Toomey. And it's just such I love the way that scene builds. The scene with the two kids in the fruit cellar and them encountering Mother. I think that's one of the scariest scenes in the film, and there's several that really still chill me to the bone when I watch them. And just the way that they shoot Mother, you don't see her. Very much how Hitchcock did the shower scene, where he had different actresses playing Mother. That wasn't Anthony Perkins. But in this, it's like you see Mother's shadow. The girl's trying to get out of the basement through the window on the logs that are stacked there, and she slips and one of the logs falls, and you just see Mother turn her head real quick, but you don't get to see her. And then you see the knife, and then you hear the door open as she comes towards the boy trying to get out of the cellar. And it's so tension filled and so well done. Still creeps me out, and just the fact that he gets trapped in there and just how that scene concludes, it still gives me the chills when I watch it. The other scene that just really gets me is the scene where Norman has sort of barricaded him and Mary in his old bedroom because he says Mother's downstairs and she's waiting to kill you. He's guarding her, but you can tell just because of how strong Perkins' convictions are and how strong his acting is, this is when you're slowly starting to see Norman slip back into insanity. And it's subtle at first, because the way that he's holding the knife standing over her is very odd. And then when she wakes up, like he's guarding the door, but you can tell that there's something slipping on him. And then what I think is the most brilliant scene is that he says, "I'm starting to become confused again, aren't I?" And she said, "Of course not." And then he snaps, and you see that sympathetic man that you've been rooting for through this whole film go to this very dark place. It's so brilliant, and it still creeps me out because, again, it's so quick. And then when she says, "You are becoming confused again," the sensitive Norman comes back. It's still just so gripping and so well done. There's a lot of other scenes that I really love. I love when Norman gets the phone calls from Mother, and I love that throughout the course of the film, you never know who's calling him. You don't know if it's Lila. You don't know if it's Mrs. Spool. Initially, when he answers the phone, he picks it up on his right ear, and he's talking on the phone, like a scene where he thinks it's Mary's mother. He goes, "Hello, Mrs. Loomis, how are you this?" And then he all of a sudden, like almost like you hear the score building. You hear Jerry Goldsmith's score building, and he switches the phone to his other ear and starts talking to his mother like a little boy. And again, every time Mary takes the phone from him, she doesn't hear anybody, but when he picks the phone up again to this ear, he's like, "Oh no, Mother, I'm sorry we were interrupted." it's still, and it's never really explained, but it's so creepy. Again, like the scene in the bedroom, you're seeing him slowly get more and more insane, and it's again with the facial tics and things that he does in his voice when he's talking. The scene where Mary, of course, has killed Dr. Raymond on accident at this point, and Norman sees this and sees Mary dressed up like Mother and says, "It's all right, Mother, it's all right." And he's like, "I'm gonna have to," and he said they're gonna come for you like they did before. So he's lost his grip on reality. He's back to, who he was in the original Psycho. The scene where she's attacking Norman as he's following her down the steps to the fruit cellar. That really bothered me as a kid because he takes some serious stabs, and then when he tries to grab the knife away from her and slices his hand, it still just gets me. I feel that every time. And again, amazing editing by Andrew London, amazing direction by Richard Franklin, and the acting from both Meg Tilly and Anthony Perkins is just absolutely incredible. And then, of course, the ending of the film where you find out who's been responsible for everything. And it turns out to be Mrs. Spool, who we're introduced to when he works at Statler's Diner, and find out that she is Norman's real mother. And just the way she goes out, and Norman is right back to where he was in that original 1960 film. And just the last shot of him standing by the house, clicking on the Bates Motel sign, and we're right back to where we were. And everything that him and Dr. Raymond had worked on while he was in the institution is gone, and Norman Bates is back to his crazy self. And like I said, even to this day, 40 years later, I first saw the film a year after it was in theaters, but it still haunts me and still makes me sad every time I watch it, because we like Norman. And in the first film, we felt sorry for him, but there was something about him that was off. Even when I watch it knowing what I know now from Psycho 2, there's just something off about him. You like him, but you can tell that there's something just not right about him. Whereas in Psycho 2, he's gotten rid of that, or tried to, or suppress it, or, trying to just be himself. And he's unable to do that. And you're really rooting for him in Psycho 2. You want him to do well. Lila Loomis is the villain in this film, in my opinion, even though she was, one of the heroines in the original 1960 film. And this one, it's like she's trying to push him over the edge again to recommit him. And she uses her own daughter to try to do that. So she's really playing with fire. She doesn't know what could happen to her child, but she's willing to do anything and everything to get him back into the asylum. And I just feel like that has really changed her from someone we cared about to someone we cannot stand. And the fact that she succeeded, even though it cost her and her daughter their lives, really just makes me, it just really makes me angry every time I watch it. The last thing I want to talk about with regards to the film is that, like I said, this amazing bound screenplay, Tom Holland's original script for the film, and talk about some of the changes they made. And it was really interesting. There was some changes that were made to a couple of characters, and there was also some scenes that were excised from the final film. And they were actually scenes that I wish they could have kept in, especially one. The first thing I want to talk about is the characters. So in the original Psycho, you have Sheriff Chambers, played by John McIntyre. I think that's how you say his name. And then you also had Dr. Richmond, who was played by Simon Oakland. Now, he was supposed to be Norman Bates' psychiatrist in this film. So it even says at the beginning of this book, it says, "Special note, the following character names have been changed throughout the script. Dr. Richmond is changed to Dr. Bill Raymond, and Sheriff Chambers is changed to Sheriff John Hunt." Now, the scene that I really wish they could have kept in, it's a very small scene, but I always loved this. And it's right after the judgment of Norman Bates being restored to sanity, and Lila Loomis protesting that in the film, and then being told that if she keeps her outbursts going, they're going to remove her from the court. So it's after the line where she says, "Are you satisfied now, Doctor, turning a murderer loose on an innocent public?" And here's the part where where it sort of goes on a little bit longer. Dr. Raymond, of course, says Norman was not convicted of murder. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity. Since he's no longer insane, has just as much of his own life as you and I. And Lila says, this is some of the stuff they cut out. She said, "You and I never killed anybody, Doctor. He did. No amount of legal hocus pocus will ever change that fact. And when he kills again, which he will, you will be directly responsible." Now, some of that dialogue is in the film and some of it is different. When she leaves, the doctor says, "Remember her?" And Norman says, "Yes, she's the sister of the one I killed in the shower." And his doctor says, "Right, shall we go?" And this is the part I really liked. He said he takes a step away only to realize Norman isn't following. He turns back to see his former patient staring about at the bustle of the hall with something close to amazement. And he says, "What is it, Norman?" And Norman says, "I just wish I could tell her I was sorry." I thought would have been so powerful. Another scene I really liked that wasn't in the final film is that there's actually dialogue between Dr. Raymond and Mary, right following the scene where he asks her if he can give her a lift to work. And they actually have dialogue in the car on the way to the Statler's Diner. And here's some of the dialogue from, just pretty much how the conversation goes. He pretty much asks her, what's it like living with Norman? And he's like, "Do you know about his past?" And she's like, "Yeah, Norman's told me everything." And she's like, "Look, Norman and I are good for each other. He helps me. I help him. You stay out of it, all right?" And he just tells her, he said, "Even with years of therapy, there are no guaranteed cures in psychiatry, especially in cases like Norman's." And then she's like, "Well, why did you let him out?" And he's like, "Well, he's not sick." "Well, which is he?" And then she asks him, "Well, which is he? Is he sane or mad? You're his psychiatrist. You should know." And he says, "Look, it took me years of therapy to kill the mad mother inside Norman's head. I think it would be best if you moved out of that house." And she says she won't. And he's like, "Why not?" And she's like, "Norman has paid his debt to society. He doesn't owe you, me, or anyone else anything. Not anymore. So why don't you just leave him alone to lead a normal life?" And he's like, "That's what I'm trying to do." And she said, "How?" "By taking him away from the one thing he cares about." And he goes, "I really wonder if you realize just how delicately balanced Norman is." And I really just like that because, again, Norman's switch back to his dark side is very abrupt in the film. Again, it doesn't take place over a matter of months or years. It takes place, it seems like, over a matter of a couple weeks, where he was in an institution for 2 decades. But I like that this dialogue kind of hints at, like, okay, yeah, he's fine now, but if you start pretty much fucking with him, he could really easily slip back into what he was like when they first committed him. And the last thing, I don't want to go through the whole thing because I really want people to experience this. If you're interested in getting the screenplay, like I said, just check out Tom Holland's Terror Time website. I will put a link down below where people can check it out. But at the end of the script, Mary doesn't die. In the movie, they just made it seem like she was killed by the sheriff's department. In this, there's the conversation between Sheriff Hunt and the DA in the office. And the sheriff is saying, "If you'd seen Mary Loomis at the end, you wouldn't question it. She'd gone mad. Dressed in Norman's mother's clothes and wig, trying to kill Norman, and him hardly able to defend himself any longer." And then he said, "It was horrible." There's a pause. He says, "Maybe we'll be able to ask her someday." And the DA says, "What's her condition?" And Sheriff Hunt says, "She'll pull through okay, but she's mad as a hatter." She's pretty much gone insane at the end of the film. So, yeah, this is and actually, if you buy it off of, one last thing, if you buy it off of the Terror Time website, you do get it autographed. So it is autographed by Tom Holland. Probably one of my favorite things that I have from Psycho 2. I'm so glad that I just pulled the trigger on this and bought it. It's for any fan of Psycho 2, you owe it to have this in your collection. And that's going to be about it. I know this was really long. Also, the last thing I want to showcase is one of my favorite things in my collection. I got this off of eBay years ago, but it was a promotional key that was given out when Psycho 2 was released. I've seen these things go for a pretty good penny now, but I always love this one because when you go to Universal Studios, or at least when I was going back, I remember the times I've gone to Universal Studios, I've been several times, but they never had a keychain that looked like one of the keys from the Bates Motel. You know, it's a circle with Bates Motel and the cabin number, and these keys look exactly like the ones from the film. And this is one of my prized items in my collection. I've had it for a long time, and I'm so grateful that I bought it because I got it really inexpensively compared to what it's going for now. But yeah, that's one of my favorite things. Yeah, Psycho 2 is the best. I've had a lot of fun just sort of sharing my stories and all of the elements that make this film so wonderful. I love everything about the film. I think just everybody in the cast does a great job. Not only, you know, I've already gone and gushed over Tony Perkins, but Meg Tilly, will always have a crush on her. One of my first crushes from when I was a kid. But everybody in the film is fantastic. Robert Loggia, Hugh Gillum, Claudia Breyer, Robert Allen Brown, Lee Garlington. Yeah, just, and even Mr. Holland himself plays Deputy Norris. So yeah, it's a film where all the components just came together. It's like a beautiful symphony when I watch it. Everything just works, and I'm so happy that I was able to do this series, celebrating one of my favorite films of all time, one of the most important films of all time. It's just like I said, it's very much like Salem's Lot. It's an old friend. It's one that I'm grateful that I've had in my life for almost 4 decades. And I hope that everybody enjoyed this series. Thanks so much for all the support, and I promise I will talk to you guys again very, very soon. So take it easy. Stay scared as always. Hey fellow Fright Fiends, just want to say thank you again for supporting Boogeyman Ben's Horror Zone. If you're brand new to the channel and you haven't yet subscribed, please hit the subscribe button down below, hit the bell notification so you're updated every time I drop a new video. I typically do this once or twice a week with new content. I've been doing this for over 11 years, and the horror genre is a passion of mine, and it really means a lot to me that I can share that passion with all of you guys. Thanks so much again for the support, and I'll talk to you again later. Take it easy, stay scared as always.